The parade ground of Naval Base San Diego was a sea of pristine white uniforms, over 2,000 sailors standing at attention under the unrelenting California sun. The occasion was a rare one, a full division assembly to honor the outgoing Admiral, a man who had spent 40 years in service and was known for his rigid, old-school command style. The air was thick with starch and ceremony, the kind of event where every button was polished and every breath was measured. Among the thousands of young enlisted men and women stood a figure who seemed to blend into the crowd perfectly. She was of average height, with a utilitarian haircut, and a face that held the neutral, watchful expression of someone used to observing rather than being observed. Her uniform was immaculate, but there was something in the way she held herself, a stillness, a coiled readiness, that suggested she was not a typical sailor. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Alara Steele, though hardly anyone on this base knew that name or the weight it carried. The ceremonies droned on. Speeches were made about duty, honor, and the decades of the Admiral's service. The Admiral himself, a barrel-chested man named Hollister, with a thick neck and a famously short temper, stood on the reviewing stand, his jaw tight. He was not a man for sentiment. He was a man for discipline, for the old ways, for a Navy that existed before the integration of women into combat roles, a concept he still privately scoffed at. His retirement was, in his eyes, another sign of the times softening the fleet. As the final speech concluded, a low, disruptive hum cut through the reverent silence. It was a drone, and a small civilian quadcopter buzzing about 50 feet above the assembled masses. It was a clear breach of base security, a speck of chaos in the ordered universe Admiral Hollister had spent his life building. His face flushed a deep crimson. He scanned the ranks of officers, his gaze falling on the nearest figure of authority, which happened to be a young, raw-boned Marine captain standing at the edge of the formation. "What in the blue hell is that?" Hollister barked, his voice amplified by the stand's sound system. He pointed a thick finger at the drone. "Get that thing down! Now!" The Marine captain, flustered and with no clear orders or equipment to deal with an airborne drone, saluted sharply and turned to his radio, trying to raise the base's security detail. The drone continued its lazy, insolent circle. Hollister's patience, as never a deep well, evaporated. He stomped down the steps of the stand, his eyes blazing, looking for anyone to blame for this insult on his day. He pushed past a few junior officers, his gaze sweeping over the front ranks of the assembled sailors. They all stared straight ahead, statues in the heat. His eyes locked onto a figure in the front row. It was the woman with the utilitarian haircut and the unnervingly calm eyes. To Hollister, she was just another sailor, a seaman or a petty officer at best, someone to be the object of his frustration. He saw inaction. He saw a lack of initiative. "You!" he roared, stopping directly in front of Alara Steele. "You see that?" He jabbed a finger skyward toward the drone, his face inches from hers. "What are you waiting for? A written invitation? You have eyes, don't you? You have hands. Do something! Stop standing there like a lump!" The sailors on either side of her flinched. The air grew thick with tension. Ilara's expression did not change. She slowly, deliberately, brought her gaze from the drone down to the Admiral's contorted face. Her eyes were the color of a winter sea, cold and profoundly deep. She did not speak. That silence enraged Hollister further. It was a breach of protocol, a challenge. In his world, a junior sailor snapped to attention and shouted, "Aye, aye, sir!" He saw her stillness not as discipline, but as insolence. He needed to break it, to reassert the natural order. "You little punk!" he spat, the insult dripping with contempt. "Don't you look at me like that. I am an admiral in the United States Navy, and you are a nothing. You are a disgrace to that uniform by standing there uselessly while a security breach flies over your head." And then, in a moment that would freeze the blood of every single one of the 2,000 witnesses, Admiral Hollister drew back his hand and struck her across the face. The sharp crack of skin on skin echoed off the surrounding buildings, louder than any cannon shot. A collective gasp seemed to suck the very air from the parade ground. Time stopped. Elara Steele's head barely moved with the blow. She had taken hits from men twice the Admiral's size who were trying to kill her. This was nothing but pain. What mattered was the intent. What mattered was the public humiliation, the degradation of service. Her eyes, still locked on his, didn't show anger. They didn't show shock. They showed a flicker of something far more terrifying, a profound, pitying disappointment. And the drone, forgotten for a moment, suddenly wobbled, emitted a high-pitched whine, and plummeted from the sky, crashing into a patch of manicured grass 50 yards away. No one noticed. All eyes were on the woman and the Admiral. A young lieutenant, pale as a sheet, rushed up to the Admiral, his voice a frantic whisper. "Sir, Admiral, the drone. Base security jammed it. They just got the signal through." Hollister ignored him, still breathing heavily, his hand stinging from the impact. He had made his point. He had shown this insolent sailor her place. Elara finally spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried with a calm, lethal clarity that reached the ears of the officers now converging on the scene, including the base's commanding officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Captain Reyes. "Admiral," Elara said, her voice devoid of emotion, "you are mistaken. I was awaiting orders from the base command, which I do not fall under. My role here today is observational only." She did not touch her reddening cheek. Captain Reyes arrived, her face a mask of professional horror. She looked from the Admiral's purple rage to the calm, disciplined woman he had just struck. Reyes knew. She knew exactly who was standing before her, a fact that had been communicated to her in a sealed, high-security briefing just that morning. "Admiral Hollister," Reyes said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "A word, now!" Hollister scoffed. "Captain, this woman—" "This woman!" Reyes interrupted, stepping between them and lowering her voice to a venomous hiss, "is Lieutenant Commander Elara Steele. She is not in your chain of command." "She is not in my chain of command. She is a direct commission officer on loan from a joint task force you are not cleared to know the name of. She holds the Triton. She is a Navy SEAL, one of the first, and she has more combat time in the mountains of Afghanistan and the streets of Ramadi than you have days at sea. You just struck a special operations combat veteran in front of 2,000 of her peers. You are done." The color drained from Hollister's face, not to his cheeks, but to some deep, internal void. The anger vanished, replaced by the cold, creeping dread of a man who has just made a fatal, irreversible mistake. He looked back at Elara. She was no longer looking at him. She was staring at the spot where the drone had crashed, her expression utterly unreadable. The ceremony was over, and the legend of what happened that day was just beginning. The aftermath of the parade ground incident was a hurricane contained within the sterile walls of the Naval Base headquarters. Admiral Hollister was escorted from the field, not with the fanfare of a retiring hero, but with the grim silence of a man being led to his own execution. He was ushered into Captain Reyes's office, a room that suddenly felt more like an interrogation cell. The door closed with a soft, definitive click, leaving his world of 60-second salutes and polished brass on the other side. Captain Reyes did not offer him a seat. She stood behind her desk, her hands flat on the polished wood, her knuckles white. On her desk sat a secure telephone, one with multiple encryption locks. She picked up the receiver, dialed a short code, and spoke in low, clipped tones that Hollister could not decipher. She hung up and looked at him, not with anger, but with the cold resignation of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "You have exactly 1 hour to clear your personal effects from your quarters," she said. Your retirement ceremony is canceled. Your security clearance is suspended pending a full investigation. You will not speak to anyone about what happened today, and you will remain on base until transport can be arranged to take you to Washington for a closed-door hearing." Hollister found his voice, though it was a gravelly shadow of its former boom. "For striking an insubordinate junior officer? For maintaining order? This is a political lynching." Reyes shook her head slowly. "You still don't get it. She is not junior to you in any sense that matters. And the officer you struck is a direct descendant of the first classes to include women in naval special warfare. She didn't just pass SEAL training, she redefined the outer limits of it. Her psychological profile is so heavily redacted that even I can only see the first page. She has been on missions that will not be declassified in our lifetime." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And you called her a punk. You struck her, in public, for not acting outside her orders." Hollister opened his mouth, but no words came. The reality was a physical weight on his chest. Meanwhile, in a small Spartan office down the hall, Elara Steele sat calmly in a chair. A corpsman had offered to tend to her cheek, but she had politely declined. The red mark was already fading, and a testament to her body's efficient healing and the fact that Hollister's strength was that of an aging man, not a warrior. She sat with her hands resting on her knees, her back straight, her breathing slow and even. She was running a technique she had learned long ago, a method of compartmentalization that allowed her to process trauma, insults, and pain without allowing them to cloud her judgment. A young lieutenant, the same pale one who had announced the drone's demise, knocked and entered, his hands trembling slightly as he held a manila folder. "Commander Steele, Captain Reyes asked me to give you this. It's the initial incident report. She wants you to review it for accuracy." Elara took the folder. "Thank you, Lieutenant. That will be all." He hesitated at the door. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, what he did, it was wrong. It was beyond wrong. Everyone out there, we're ashamed." Elara looked up, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Lieutenant, the sun will come up tomorrow. The Navy will still have ships. And that young sailor standing third from the left in the second platoon, the one who looked like he was about to faint, he just learned a lesson about power and its abuse that no textbook could ever teach. That lesson might make him a better officer one day. Focus on that." The lieutenant nodded, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and gratitude, and slipped out. Left alone, Elara opened the folder. The report was clinical, detailing the time, location, the Admiral's actions, and the witnesses. She read it without expression. Her mind, however, was not on the report. It was drifting back, as it always did in moments of forced stillness, to another place, another time, a time of screaming wind and the thump of rotors, of mud and cold, and the constant gnawing fear that was just another tool in her kit. She thought of the obstacle course at Coronado, the grinder, where they broke down the strong and built them back up into something else entirely. She thought of Hell Week, the 5.5 days of torture where sleep was a memory and the cold Pacific surf was a constant, grinding enemy. She remembered being the only woman in a class of over 100 men, most of whom openly hoped she would fail, some of whom actively tried to make her fail. She remembered the instructors, their faces like granite, who treated her with an extra dose of viciousness, determined to prove the experiment was a mistake. But she also remembered the moment it changed. It was during a land navigation exercise in the rugged mountains east of San Diego. Heavily loaded, exhausted beyond reason, her team was lost. The squad leader, a hulking former college football player named Kowalski, had stubbornly led them in the wrong direction for 2 hours, his pride preventing him from admitting he had misread the map. They were going to fail the evolution, and in BUD/S, failing an evolution meant a ticket home. Ilara, her own map soaked and torn, had quietly reoriented their position using a distant peak and the sun. She had approached Kowalski, not with a challenge, but with a quiet suggestion. "Kowalski, I think there might be a faster route to the checkpoint. The terrain to the south looks more forgiving. If we cut across that ridge..." We can shave an hour." Kowalski, his face a mask of mud and frustration, had snarled at her. "You think you can read a map better than me? You think because they're letting you play soldier, you're actually one of us? Shut up and walk." They had walked for another hour, deeper into the wrong canyon. The sun was beginning to sink, and the temperature was dropping. The team's morale was in the dirt. Ilara watched the frustration build, not in herself, but in the other 6 men on the team. They were following a leader who was leading them to failure. She stepped forward again. "Kowalski, with respect, you're going to get us all rolled back. I have the correct azimuth. I can get us to the checkpoint before nightfall, but we have to move now." Kowalski turned on her, his fist clenched. For a moment, she saw the same rage in his eyes that she had just seen in Admiral Hollister's. The rage of a man whose authority, built on nothing but physical size and bluster, was being questioned by someone he deemed lesser. But before he could move, another member of the team, a quiet Texan named Ridgway, stepped between them. "She's right, Kowalski. You're wrong. We've been following you into the weeds for 2 hours. Let her try, or we all ring the bell tonight." Kowalski looked at Ridgway, then at the others. There was no support in their eyes, only exhaustion and the desperate hope for a leader who could actually lead. He stepped back, his shoulders slumping. "Fine, she leads. If we fail, it's on her." Ilara had taken the point, moving with a quiet confidence that belied her exhaustion. She led them up the ridge, through a narrow pass, and down into the correct valley. They made the checkpoint with 20 minutes to spare. That night, around a cold meal in their tents, something shifted. The hostility didn't vanish overnight, but it was replaced by a grudging respect. Kowalski never spoke to her again for the rest of training, but the others started to see her not as the woman, but as Steel, the teammate who had saved their skins. That was the lesson she carried with her. True authority wasn't given by rank or physical power. It was earned in the crucible of shared hardship. It was proven by competence, by calm under pressure, by the willingness to do what was right even when it was hard. Admiral Hollister, for all his stars and ribbons, had never learned that lesson. And now, his entire legacy would be defined by that failure.